Am I under a curse? Well, you might be. There are several things that you need to discern. I want to share some personal stories, some stories from a person that I recently met, as well as amazing information from this great book by Adam Bly on possessions, exorcisms, and hauntings. We're going to get right into this information. Some things you need to think about, some things you need to consider. If you would like to support this channel in any way, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee. Let's get right into it. So first, I want to share the story from this person's life. I'm going to share kind of some vague details without mentioning their names and some of the things that kind of started coming to light from my own life. So this person began describing some of the things that she had been going through. First of all, she had this encounters where she was dealing with some banking issues and dealing with some political parties and some things where she brought this to light. And because of this kind of got her blacklisted in certain areas. And then she started seeing an other series of events. She was having difficulty finding work. Then she began seeing some difficulties in her marriage. Her husband got connected with someone from another country that began doing voodoo curses from the country they were from, or kind of similar things like that. And then as she began doing some deliverance prayers and began growing in her spiritual life and in her sacramental life, even some things by Father Jim Blount, who I think is an amazing and very holy priest. She was doing this, I think it was like a 140-day or 144-day deliverance from curses and family curses. Things got worse. Some family members went to the hospital. A whole series of bad things began happening to her and to her family, both spiritually, physically in her health, and financially. As she began telling her story, which is in a lot more detail, I don't even remember all the details, I began reflecting on just a very small version of my own experience and just the reality of like how our life should be. So, and I probably shared a little bit of this before, in June and towards the middle of July, I just began noticing certain difficulties in my life, struggles, temptations, attacks, especially things related to my personal business, that things were just more difficult than they really should be. And it felt like almost like there was a ceiling on my life that no matter how much work I would do, it would not produce results. And I kept thinking, it's like there's something on me, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I still don't know exactly what it was. All I know is that it was there and life was more difficult than it should be in a variety of different ways that I'm not mentioning right now. When I went to the Shrine of Knock in Ireland, it was an amazing week, as I've shared in some videos. And then when I came back, I was doing the same amount of effort, the same amount of technique. Nothing changed in what I was doing. And my life became significantly more fruitful in the last 4 weeks than in a long time, but certainly than in June. And what this was reminding me of is the normal fruitfulness that we are sharing in. We see this in the book of Genesis, that Adam and Eve share in a fruitfulness of God by simply being his children. And this is how our life should be, that everything we touch explodes and grows and is fruitful and is filled with the life of God. But because of sin, that fruitfulness is significantly reduced. Work is difficult. We sweat. Having children is a chore and a burden. This is what many of us experience. And sometimes we experience this to a much greater degree, what we might call a curse. Now, was I under a curse? Perhaps not. But mine looked a little bit similar, maybe like 1% of what this woman was going through. And some of you out there are experiencing unnecessary difficulties, and you've probably had the thought, is something going on? Is this a curse? Is this something spiritual? So let me read a little bit from a section in this book from Adam Bly. So Adam Bly is a lay person that is extremely well trained and works with priests and ministries in the church that deal with exorcism. So he has a lot of knowledge. He's also, I think, a psychotherapist. And the book is called Possession, Exorcism, and Hauntings. And he gives lots of information in this book about things that we should know about and learn about to be familiar with what's going on in our own spiritual life. So first, typically we speak about 3 levels of demonic attack: infestation, oppression, and possessions. Although with infestation, sometimes just people will call it temptations. So in that sense, you could maybe say that these are 3 or 4 different levels. So let's talk about demonic oppression, which is the category under which curses can be placed. Demonic oppression is when demons have gained the right to interact with a person and they exercise those rights. Demons often develop a relationship of consent with a person or family line over years before it evolves into demonic oppression. This is because the demons don't cause distress until they have enough rights to remain without the person's ongoing consent. The demons then start controlling the person through threats and punishment. Some of the causes of demonic oppression are ongoing spiritual communication with a supposed human spirit, spirit guide, totem animal, holy angel, or other deception tailored to that person, occult or black magic rituals, living in a location with a demonic infestation for a time and then forming a relationship with the spirits there, consecration of a family line to demons by a previous generation, a life of deep and prolonged sin, possibly combined with drugs or alcohol, that weakens the mind of the person, a demon being sent to harm a spiritually vulnerable person, being the victim of a curse in some form while being spiritually vulnerable. This could be an ancestor that consecrated the person or family line to demons, an enemy that got the person to ingest something that had a demon attached to it, or some other form of curse. Submitting to non-Christian faith healers, psychics or energy healers, mediums, card readers, or occult practitioners, other forms of consent to interactions with a demon. So here you see that a person can fall into oppression in a variety of ways, often through our own choice by things that they do, through our own choice by the places where we live, or sometimes without our even knowing, through our ancestors or enemies that attack us spiritually at a time when we are spiritually vulnerable. Now, in this particular section, he doesn't mention what that means, but typically what that means is that when you're not fully in a state of grace, which this can perhaps happen to someone where they are in a state of mortal sin for some temporary period of time, and perhaps that's the door under which these oppressions come to take place. Now, in my case and in the case of the person, it's not always clear to know when this all happened. This is probably the most difficult things when it comes to possessions and or oppression is we don't know. Sometimes we can't know. And sometimes it takes a lot of discernment to figure out when was the door opened. And this answer may not ever come. So if you are someone who is suffering with this, ideally we find out when was the door opened. When was the vulnerability exposed that whatever was happening entered into your life? You may or may not find that answer. Now then we go into how do we resolve these oppressions? So now let's get right into that. People under demonic oppression are generally in great distress. Now, this woman that I was in communication with, that I was talking about her experience, was under severe distress. So it's not just kind of stress or moderate, but under severe distress. Now, when I reflect on my own experience, it was stressful. I don't know if I would say that it was great distress, but it was definitely very stressful. They have often lost the ability to work or live with their loved ones. They often have secondary health and mental problems. They may despair of help and feel that God has abandoned them. Getting them to trust God and really reach out in prayer can be difficult. Some oppression cases can drag on for years or decades of deliverance, prayer, and the sacraments. Usually, these are the cases that come from deep forms of union with a demon. One thing that can be difficult in our own country of the United States is that we have a long history of connection with Masonic ties and Masonic rituals, and often our families or our ancestors have these ties, and this makes things more complicated. He probably speaks about that in other parts of the book. Let's continue. Cases of demonic oppression can be difficult to deal with, as people are often demanding about what they think needs to be done because they are in severe distress. They just want help. And they're just wanting, please help me do this, do that. They may often demand an exorcism, as they have seen exorcisms on television or in the movies, and they see exorcism as a form of magic. People are sometimes resistant to being educated about the difference between oppression and possession, and when an exorcism is appropriate. So this is something that we need to know. Exorcisms are for the most extreme cases when it's a full possession. That is very rare. Diagnosing demonic oppression can be difficult, as objective data is often not there as it is in possession. So as I was saying, it is often difficult to know what exactly is going on. So let's kind of some more details here. Once some certainty is established that a person is oppressed, they need to focus on what lies the demons have convinced them of. These may include the false identity that the demon assumed, that the person's suffering is special and willed by God, which he's implying it is not, and that there is no help for them in the church. The deception is tailored to that particular personality and life background. The person needs to disentangle from these deceptions, as they are designed to keep the person in relationship with the demon. In addition to addressing the demonic lies, they need to build up their spiritual life, first with confession, renewal of baptismal promises, and a solid prayer life. And this would obviously also include consecration to the Blessed Mother, to Saint Joseph, etc. They should also start participating in the sacraments often as a foundation. Now, as he implies earlier, doing these things doesn't magically resolve things quickly. It can take years or even decades. As he says, why? We don't always know. Once the lies are undone and the person renounces a relationship with the demon, the priest can pray over them, asking Jesus to free the person from their affliction. There are no set deliverance prayers for this, but the combination of the sacramental life, the renunciations, and a general prayer to Jesus asking for the liberation of the person should work. If the case of oppression is well progressed, the person may have transitory states of manifestation or turn out to be completely possessed. When praying over the person, and particularly when the priest lays hands on them in prayer, the demon may be agitated and show itself by speaking. It is typical for the person to show other signs at this time also. So in general, we can summarize that the person should turn to a life of prayer, a life of the sacraments, renewal of baptismal promises, seeking the help of the church. Now, one of the difficulties can be that when we bring these situations to the local church where we are, they often may not believe us. This is the case with this woman that I was speaking with, that in the area where they are, the priests there just simply don't believe in these types of things, and this makes life significantly difficult. So we often need to seek out help from other places. And all of this, one of the strongest lies that we need to break is that Satan or the demons, that they are extremely powerful. We always need to have in mind that God is infinitely powerful. We need to renounce these lies of the power of evil and accept and have really put into our minds and hearts the power of God. And we also need to persevere. Even if it takes a long time, we need to persevere. There is hope. We can be delivered. Sometimes we need to take certain measures, such as going to pilgrimage sites, going really far to have all this freed from us so that we can experience the joy and the peace and the fruitfulness that God wants us to experience. My friends, if you're wanting more information about this, check out this book. It's called Possessions, Exorcisms, and Hauntings by Adam Bly. He has other books that are great information. Turn to Our Lady, have hope in Jesus Christ, and know that the power of God will set you free.